We are truly blessed to have an opportunity to spend time with Mustafa here. He's my middle one. And then Noor is 16 and Zakaria is 5, and they're over there. So good to meet you all. First of all, do you mind, can I get a glass of water or a bottle of water? Oh, thank you. Someone can get that. That'd be awesome. The way I wanted to run this was really less lecture and more answering questions. So it was billed as a workshop. So we'll try to we'll try to run it that way. What I'm going to do is talk about a few concepts related to selling. Okay, I'll just throw out a few concepts, not go super deep, but just share some ideas. And then if that elicits any interesting thoughts or people want to dig deeper, or if you have your own questions related to something that you're working on, I'm very happy to do this in a question and answer format. And also please feel free to cross-pollinate if you have experiences, okay? So I'm going to mention 5 different concepts, okay? First, I wanted to talk about what happens before you hire a sales team. Obviously, if you're at a point where you're hiring salespeople, that's great. That's a good sign. That's like, okay, I'm seeing some traction from a product perspective. And so I want to now take it to the next level. But before that, typically if you're a founder, what are you doing? You're also usually the first salesperson, right? That's out there pounding the pavement, trying to see if you can make it happen with your product. And it's a great learning experience. It's a humbling experience, right? For most people, if you've had that experience, it's because typically founders of technology companies, of software companies, tend to be technical leaders and experts. Not always, but tend to be technical leaders. And so you know what you want to build, but then when you actually have to go out and sell it, it's a new experience. It's a great learning experience, but it's hard, right? And you learn how painful it can be to be in sales, right? So let me share with you a few concepts of if you are in that space of being your own salesperson. What are the things to think about? So there's 3 things to think about if you are selling a product or you're selling some solution. The first is find the pain. Find the pain. So a lot of people, a lot of founders, a lot of salespeople get excited about features, about the cool thing that their product does. You might have spent months building this amazing AI-driven thing that your product does, but frankly, a person that's in a position to write a check to do something is not just writing a check of their hard-earned money for a feature. They're trying to solve a problem that they have, right? So you have to resist the temptation to talk about features. You have to explore. In fact, don't even pitch your product at first, which sounds crazy, right? This is sales. You're supposed to pitch. Find the pain first. Be that business advisor. Don't talk about your product or solution. Explore. Ask lots of questions. Do what we call discovery, right? Discovery. Discovery means finding, just asking lots of questions to understand where there's a pain point. If you can find a pain point at the company level, great. You know what's even better? If you can find a pain point that's personal to the person you're talking about, right? So that's called like a level 2 or a level 3 pain. When you can make it personal, it's gonna be a lot easier to make the sale, okay? So that's number 1, is find the pain. Number 2 is find the decision maker. Sounds pretty straightforward, right? It's like if you're talking one-on-one with another person that's a solo shop, they're the decision maker, but that's not how most companies that can afford to buy something work. Many of them, you'll have many different people in the ecosystem. And a mistake that people make is you go to the potential users and try to sell to them. You may be in a situation where the user is also the decision maker, but for larger companies, that is rare. Usually, the users will have to at some point introduce you to someone who actually cuts the checks. right? Whether that's a CFO or whoever that is, or CEO or something like that. So you have to find the decision maker. And that can be complicated, and sometimes it's not just one decision maker. More and more enterprises are a multi-decision maker ecosystem that you have to do something called multi-threading, right? Where you find, you kind of work with like up to, like on average at enterprise level companies, it's like 8 people that you need to get aligned in order to make a sale, okay? So you have to have the energy and fortitude to have conversation after conversation and dig to find out who the person is that is ultimately the decision makers, with the plural, okay? So that's number 2. And then third, find the budget, right? So all is great, and they may love your solution, but obviously if the money's not there, then that's the thing. You need to have the uncomfortable conversation as early as possible about like, do you all have budget for this? What is your budget situation? Did budget get approved for this? Do you have a line item? Oh, you don't? Okay, but when is your budgeting process so we can work towards that, right? These are uncomfortable questions that you dig deep and find out. And if the person you're talking to can't answer those questions, what does that mean? They're not the decision maker. You're not talking to the right person, right? So a lot more detail behind these things when you're coaching salespeople, but for yourselves, as you're having some of these initial conversations, think about those 3 things. Find the what? Pain, find the decision maker, and find the budget. There's a classic framework that sales managers use when they are checking in with their reps on deals and pressure testing deals for forecasting purposes, right? It's called BANT, B-A-N-T, BANT. That stands for budget, authority, needs, and timeline. And it's roughly equivalent to what I just described to you, okay? So think about that. If you are your own salesperson, think about BANT, think about what that means and how you develop quality pipeline for your sales. Speaking of pipeline, the other thing to remember is sales is a numbers game, right? You need to have throughput. You need to have endless energy for filling the top of your pipeline with early stage deals that are not close to eventually get through the funnel and actually make a deal happen. You need to do enough of these calls and have enough doors slam in your face to make it down that pipeline and make sales happen, and it's hard. But that's what sales can be about. Now, inshallah, you're fortunate enough to have a product that is exciting out at the gate, right? So your funnel can be less narrow, but most products are not like that. It just takes a lot of throughput of continuing to build pipeline and then analyzing as you build that pipeline where you're seeing kinks, where you're seeing significant reductions in pipeline and why that might be happening. Yeah. Again, I'm talking at a very high level here. There's tons of detail behind all this, but I just want to share some thoughts, and if anyone has questions about that, I'm happy to answer. Okay, so that's my statement about if you're your own salesperson. Okay, now we're going to switch. Now, if you are fortunate enough to be in a position to hire a salesperson or a sales team, what are some things that you should think about? Well, first is you have to be very familiar with your metrics, okay? Now, a lot of you will say, well, if you have investors in your product, I already know what my metrics are because I present metrics to my investors or to my co-founders or to other members of my team all the time. You say, I already got that, right? But the metrics that you use to report your financial health are different than the metrics that you need to run a sales team. I often try to talk about them as financial metrics versus operational metrics, okay? Financial metrics are things that investors are interested in. Obviously, revenue, profit, right? Maybe churn, but really it's really at a high level, right? Net revenue retention, NRR. ARR, right? Annual recurring revenue, if you're in the SaaS world. These are things that you put into decks when you're pitching for new investment, or if you have a board, or if you have, existing investors, right? But those are not metrics that are useful to manage a sales team, right? You can't manage a sales team and steer a sales team on a day-to-day basis based on annual recurring revenue. That's way too backwards looking, okay? So you've got to think about certain other metrics. I'll share a few here. I won't go, again, not gonna go into detail unless someone wants to, all right? The first is something called bookings instead of revenue. The difference between bookings and revenue is backwards looking. It's actual delivered, like you've delivered product and value, and like you've signed a 12-month contract, you're in month 6, so you've delivered 6 months worth of value, and you recognize that revenue. Bookings is when you sign a contract, even before you've delivered the product, you book those bookings are dollars that you can count. That is early, right? And that is more useful to figuring out how productive your sales team is. So bookings versus revenue, okay? Bookings. Second is churn. You want to know what's going on with your existing customers, right? How much of them are renewing versus not renewing. And the third is something called bleed, which means if you had existing contracts in a given quarter and they're supposed to renew in the next year, in that same quarter, let's say you sold a 12-month deal in March, the next March they're up for renewal. Like how many of them renewed versus like the contract is expired and like, it's still hanging out there, right? That's called bleed, when your contract hasn't closed yet. And as if we get into details, I can describe why that's important, right? It's important from a forecasting perspective. So those are 3 potential metrics to manage your sales organization, okay? There's also something you can use to manage your sales organization from a financial perspective called the magic number, okay? It sounds nice, sounds magical. So the magic number, I'll speak to it. I was gonna write it out, I'm a visual person. But so the magic number is a measure of the efficiency of your sales organization, meaning how much you're spending on sales and marketing versus what you're getting back. That's called the magic number, okay? The magic number is calculated as let's say we are in Q2 right now of your 4 quarters. It's Q2 revenue minus Q1 revenue times 4 to make it a year instead of a quarter, divided by your sales and marketing spend in Q1, because your sales and marketing spend in Q1 drove your bookings in Q2, or your revenue. Yes? Yes, I will be happy to if we can get a market, inshallah. Yes. And then also, happy to connect with people on LinkedIn or something and share with you things in writing later as well. So magic number, again, Q2 annual recurring revenue minus Q1 annual recurring revenue times 4, that's the numerator, divided by sales and marketing spend in Q1, last quarter. Because again, you want to look at last quarter's spend, which drove investment for this quarter's revenue. If that number is 1 or greater, meaning you made more revenue last quarter or this quarter than you spent on sales and marketing last quarter, that is a very good thing. Companies that have a magic number over 1, that's a solid return on investment on your sales and marketing. Thank you. If you're like 0.75 and above, that's still pretty good, right? If you start to get below 0.5, that's a problem. You need to look at the efficiency of your sales and marketing spend, okay? That's called the magic number, okay? The inverse, I guess you could say, of your magic number is your, what's called CAC payback, CAC, right? Which is cost of customer acquisition cost. So if you are able to, all the spend you have on advertising, marketing, sales salaries, commissions, things like that, if you're able to pay back all of that within a year, that's good. A 12-month CAC payback is equivalent mathematically to a 1 magic number. It's just the inverse, okay? So we're starting to get into some numbers here. Some of you might be like, whoa, this is, it's getting crazy. But if you can't measure it, you can't fix it. And as a founder, as a CEO, if you're letting people on your payroll out there do an inefficient job, that's your money, right? That's going down the drain. And you've got to understand the numbers behind it rather than just the gut feel of, we sold this big deal, I feel pretty good about that. Okay, got a question?
Yeah, you talked about like throughput, and basically maximizing throughput to get things through the funnel. And then in the beginning, you talked about like finding the pain point and decision maker. So, like I have a company and we're trying to get it off the ground. I obviously sell all the time, but I brought on a contractor and basically told him, if you make a sale, I'll give you a chunk of what you make and kind of like commission. And I'm like, what I'm trying to pay for is that throughput, because I can't like get that volume of people or potential opportunities in my pipeline myself. Is that like, can you just pressure test that, or like think about, is that a smart approach, or?
I think that's reasonable.
Okay.
I think that's reasonable. I mean, and it's a test out, and it's a try before you buy, right? It's contractor, so it's like, if it's not working, you can cut that off. And there's no additional spend other than maybe some incidentals related to things that they need upfront, right? Like a laptop and things like that.
Yeah,
right?
theoretically, I could pay them like a salary kind of thing.
Yeah.
What would be like what would you do? Like a salary, and I trust you just keep pushing, or?
So I think that what you're doing in the early stages, I think it's fine to do a contractor model. Okay. I think if you want really good salespeople, there's no way they're going to go for that.
For contractor?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the best salespeople have their pick of places to go to, and there's no way they're going to take an opportunity like that versus a full-time employee offer with benefits, a base salary, and then like a very thought-out incentive plan with accelerators and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
In this ever-increasing virtual world, does it ever make sense to have a virtual sales team where basically you can hire more offshore resources to help you with sales, especially virtually, than having it in person? Or?
I think it's a smart idea. I think that it depends on your product and who you're selling to and what size of company. What you're describing is basically virtualization of what's called inside sales, or inside sales versus field sales. Inside sales means a bunch of people in a room dialing, right? They're not actually visiting face-to-face to customers. Field sales is you're out there in the field, you're going to headquarters of companies and you're building relationships, you're doing that multi-threading that I talked about before. It's gonna be a lot harder to sell to like the Walmarts of the world via the phone. Right, you're gonna have to go to Bentonville or wherever they are, right, in Arkansas, right? So it's a low risk way to see if you're getting product market fit and traction on smaller companies, right, to do that type of model, but it's not gonna necessarily be useful as you move to mid-market and above. Yes? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So we have students at this school that could leave the school for two reasons. The better reason, you hope your kid is moving up to a better school, more challenging school. The worst reason is we kicked you out or we asked you to please leave before we kick you out to an easier school. Do you ever look at that funnel, why it's getting narrower, and where those people are going, like an exit interview, or you just let them go?
Oh, are you talking about in terms of salespeople?
Yes, when you have a funnel.
Yeah. Okay,
Your
so
customers don't renew the membership.
oh, I see what you're saying. So it's your business, right? So it's like the contracts that you have, or like not even the contracts you have. The new business you're trying to sell is typically where you want to see a funnel, right? Of like, I got a first call, I got a discovery, I was able to do a demo, I was able to talk to a decision maker, and down to like signed contract, right? That's the funnel.
Yes.
So yes, you should understand like why. They may have decided at any given time not to, because sometimes a no is not a complete no, it's a later, right? And you should know that, right, if that's the case, right? So I think there's a lot of reasons why funnels can narrow, and it's very important to understand why that's happening. But the only way you're gonna understand with a strong signal of what's happening is if you have volume, right? If you've only talk to 3 people, it's gonna not give you the directionality of 10 or 20 or 50 people, right? Sorry, one more back there and then I'll come back, yes.
So when you are calculating the numbers for the, Q2 minus Q1 and the Q1 spend, exactly what sales, like expenditure are you putting there? Salaries, your sales and marketing, or salaries for your sales team going there, a portion of like the company's overhead going there? Exactly what would you calculate? Maybe,
And I was gonna ask you to add to that, do you include R&D at all in that equation?
No to that. I think it depends on how fancy you want to get. I mean, I think that early stages when you're a really small shop, you don't need to get super fancy about it. So you can think about salaries and you can think about direct expenses, right? Like commission costs on the sales side plus other expenses like travel and whatever else happens with salespeople. And then on the marketing side, your advertising spend, right? So you can start there. Eventually, maybe you want to layer on overhead costs and allocating a portion of facilities and other things and capital costs to that. I don't think that's necessary, and it's not gonna be additional fidelity when you're small. Yes.
You talked about at the beginning the pain, right? Look at the pain.
Yeah.
But we see a lot of people, a lot of society, a lot of people are willing to write a check just to enjoy, not to, just to feel good. So how does that, if you want to sell something?
Yeah.
It's either it relieves your pain or it gives you enjoyment. How, what does the enjoyment?
I think that it depends, right? I think that the idea of writing a check for enjoyment is much more of a consumer sentiment versus a business sentiment. Like if I am responsible for a certain budget on behalf of my company, I'm not gonna write a check for my enjoyment because I'll get fired. Right? I'm gonna write a check because the company needs something, and eventually my boss, someone else will audit and say, why did we buy this? Right? Yeah. So I think that, business versus consumer is like a different game, right? Yeah.
Okay.
So if you're selling to consumers, it's a different, I think what you say can really be true, right? It's like, I feel good about this sort of retail purchase, right? And a lot of companies, by the way, and it's still relevant to the people in this room, because you may decide that in the beginning stages, depending on how complex your product is, does it involve implementation or not? Is it just sort of like you can just turn it on and turn it off? Do you do a consumer online play first, right? To see if you can make money that way where you don't have to pay a sales team. You have higher margins, it's lower risk, but not all products work that way. Sometimes you have to explain it, sometimes there's configuration, there's complexities, whether that works or not. Yes?
So kind of based on that, for early startups, for early founders, when do you start selling? Especially if your product is like a SaaS thing or an application, do you start selling before you have a final product, or during development, or before development? What does that look like?
So it depends on how you're defining selling, but I think that you're talking to customers well before you've developed a product. Because you need to understand whether you have something that someone will eventually buy, right? You need to establish that product market fit, right? And so sometimes it's called product validation, it's not called sales, but you should be talking to a lot of customers before you even, or potential customers, before you even incorporate as a business, right? Or start working, because you want to find out, do I have something here that is interesting, right? And that can change, right? That can change. It does change for most companies. They pivot. And that's what good, healthy companies do, is they realize, okay, it's not quite there. Maybe we need to do this over here, but you should always be talking to customers. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Along the same lines, I've heard people talking about actually putting up an ad for the benefits that your product is going to provide, and then see if people will click on it.
and then have it go to a landing page where they say, hey, we're not quite ready yet, put in your information, put your email in, we'll contact you.
Yeah.
And then you also find out if you have a way to reach the people that have the need. Because if you go to a person that you know, like your buddy, and you talk to them, hey, can you use something like this? Like, yeah, this is great. But if you have no way of reaching people out in the digital marketplace, right, then that's another issue that you have.
I think it's a great idea. I think that you want to do a little of both. It's not an or, it's an and, right? You want to do some of that to just get a wider sense of what might be working at a surface level, and then you want to have in-depth interviews, so to speak, right, to validate with individuals that can give you trusted input. Yes.
How do you onboard salespeople when you have kind of a technical product?
Yeah. So I think that the more technical the product, the more you need to think about two things. One is the nature of the organization you're designing. So what I mean by that is it's not just a salesperson. Maybe you need a solutions engineer or someone more technical that works with the salespeople, right? So you have the salespeople making the calls, and then as soon as they have that first technical user, a potential user of your product come on, a sales engineer joins that call as well to be able to go deeper if that person has those questions, right? So you kind of separate the responsibilities between the people that are just doing the throughput, so to speak, as I described earlier, and this more precious kind of maybe expensive sales engineer that is technical enough to join those calls, okay? That's one, is like, how do you design the org? The second is, the other thing to think about is your sales enablement, as we call it, or onboarding process of like, how do you train them? How do you have them sit with someone who understands how to do it? How do you have them go along on ride-alongs till they feel comfortable talking about it? And salespeople, professional salespeople have been doing this long enough where they're comfortable enough knowing that their first few calls don't make mistakes, and they'll be like, oh, I wasn't supposed to say that, or like, oh, that was wrong, right? And then you learn by mistakes, and that's just really the only way, the best way to do it is the practical application.
Like, let's say you're a startup with like 2 or 3 people, and you're onboarding, you're deciding whether or not you add that, like a sales hire, or like add like a CSO or something like that. How do you like figure out who's a good CSO for like such an early stage product, and then B, like train him, someone that's non-technical, on like a software product that's in a new industry like AI, for example? How do you train that person to like understand kind of what you're building and what you're selling enough that he can explain it to like a non-technical audience and then bring them in for a meeting?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately you need to get good at that, at explaining that, because your decision maker won't always be technical, right? So like, even when I as a founder want to be out there selling, I need to get good at that idea of like simplifying and not just talking about the technical features, but talking about the solution I am trying to solve, right? From a business perspective, from a pain perspective. So when you get good at that, you get good at training your internal people as well on what they need to understand about, this is the business problem we're solving, and then let's get into some of the technical details that will start to come up once you double click with customers. And you can kind of have them walk through that. I think here's what I say, I don't wanna over dismiss this, but like, I think that most people that are from the sales or CSO background can understand, even if they're not technical, they can go deep pretty quickly and understand pretty quickly what's going on, right? And so if you're finding that you're struggling to find people that can do that, that's more of a hiring problem than it is a training problem. Because most high quality people will be able to grok it, I guess you could say, and understand where they need to go with it, even if they're not technical in background. We'll go to the sister right here. Yeah.
Okay, so when you guys talk about finding a decision maker, I feel like maybe it's a little bit more tricky in like the Muslim space, specifically from trying to build a product specifically for Muslim women, since we are really the minority. So my question is like, how would you like try to convince someone that might not directly benefit from the product, but like to invest in it, or convince them of the potential of the product and like how much like revenue they would make just investing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and is this a product that's more like a consumer product, like
Yes.
clothing, books,
Yes.
like something for your home, something like that, right? Okay. So I think that, and you're asking about investors, like convincing an investor or convincing the actual customer?
No, I feel like it would be easier to convince the customer, but it's just the investor will be more tricky since it's not really common within that space for this product. But there's a lot of potential for it.
Okay. So describing the potential for your product comes in the form of quantifying the addressable market, right? So if you're able to say, if you can almost picture it in terms of a presentation, right? It's like, here is the size of the market that I will be addressing through this product. And by size, that's in dollars, measured in dollars, right? So you can say, this is the size of the Muslim community in North America, let's say. And then of that, here's like and that community has X disposable income. Everyone has this issue that they face or they struggle with. We are trying to address that. We've talked to some people, some potential customers, they're willing to pay this many dollars to solve this problem. If we sold to 10% of that addressable market for this dollar amount, it would generate this much revenue, right? So you try to like paint a picture of the dollar value that you're talking about, and then talk about like why you're looking for investors, right? And then you can go on and talk about like, okay, well, in order to make this a reality, we need to invest in a manufacturing facility, or we need to do this or that, and that's going to cost this much. And so that's where you skip to that. So, but you have to be able to quantify it, because quantifying it does two things. It tells the investor, okay, there's something here, there's a real opportunity. And number two is, this is a founder who understands their market. It sends the message that you understand your business and your market, which is going to be important. No one's going to want to give money to someone who doesn't understand those details. And I think that, this is something where you can even work with people who can help you kind of articulate that and figure out how to do that.
Can I follow up?
Yes.
So I'm not really sure if there's a lot of like, I guess studies on the Muslim community, like how much they make or how much they consume this specific product. So how would I go on about that? Would I do the study myself, or I don't know if there's already something like that out there that you know about?
I think this community can probably help you with that.
We were just in Dallas last week, and
Yeah, Dinar Study did a report.
Yeah, it's
They
called
did a
Dinar
report.
Standard. They do a whole assessment of the North American Muslim market, 56 billion.
I thought it's 170 billion or something.
Well, it depends on what the market is for, right? It's different to say the market for buying a house versus the market for hijabs.
Yeah, no, they do a
Right.
whole, like, I don't know if 56 billion, they do a whole study. So we
Yeah.
can share it with you, we got it for free.
Yeah,
So I think what you do is combine there's off-the-shelf things like from Dinar Standard, and then you need to combine it with your own research, saying that I've talked to 200 people.
Yeah.
My team has talked to 200 people. These are the insights, these are the quotes of how important this is to them, how they want to solve this problem,
And
right?
these are
And things
just
like that.
consumers, right? Not
Yes.
really important.
Yeah, consumer research, right? What's called marketing research, basically. Yeah. Yeah, brother.
Yeah, I have a question about a marketing model that I want to see if it's fitting the startup when we start. Like for example, I don't know what it called the technical term. So let's say like we have online tutoring company which tell the tutors, if you bring a student, I will like give you some commission.
Give you some commission.
So
okay.
the tutors who are the service provider become the salesman
Mhm,
because
mhm.
they bring. So do you think this model like a successful model, and do you think it's a good start for startup? Like they said, like I'm building a platform for education. So reach out to teachers and tell them, if you bring your students, you will get more money or something like this.
Yeah, it's interesting. So we're getting into a particular model. I think that happy to discuss it more. I have seen models like that work. Like the model where I've seen that work is recruiting, like staffing firms. So a lot of staffing firms, it's what's called a full desk, meaning the same people who do the staffing, like of hiring people for companies, also do selling, of getting new customers on board.
Yeah.
Not all staffing firms work that way, but many of them do. I think in your case, I think it's a question of talent. Like, can you scale fast enough if you have the same people who are tutors also be salespeople or trying to bring on new people? And if they are successful in doing that, why do they need your platform, right? So you need to like ask certain questions and see if it matters, because they might not want to give you a cut if they can get all of their own, if they can figure it out all on their own, right?
Yeah.
So, that's one way to think about it. The other way to think about it is can you create a market where it's more of a marketplace where like you provide the platform, there's tutors, there's students, they can get connected to each other. So it attracts both sides, right? That's called a two-sided marketplace, where you bring in both parties. That you create a place for tutors to come to, you create a place for students to come to, and the more of each side comes in, the more that platform becomes powerful. And so that's something to think about, but that would not be one where it's like the tutors bringing their own people, right? They're actually attracted to your platform because you have the students for them.
Okay, so I think it's better to hire sales pupils directly that build a community better than relying on the teachers or tutors?
I think so, and again, I think it really depends on the research that you do for your market, but I've seen that be a more common model in some of the more famous models, such as if you think about an Uber or a DoorDash or something like that. The sort of way that they started out was they bought supply. What that means is you made it worth the while of drivers to sign up because you
Incentivized.
got incentivized people to sign up, or vice versa. You made it worthwhile for people to come on the platform and find drivers because you paid the drivers to get onto the platform so that they'd be available in Detroit for someone to pick them up on the corner of the street, right? Yeah. Yes, brother over there.
So, I want to take a step back real quick. What a lot of people struggle with, coming up with ideas, like especially around software selling applications, platforms, relatively, straightforward. So, solving a problem is, it's easier to do, right? But making it unique to where this problem, not only am I solving a pain point, but I'm also making it different than other applications. I think that's something I've been struggling with, because it's like there's only but so much you can do that hasn't already been done. So how do we kind of make it unique in a way? Is it, of course it's cost, right? You can, sell to different kind of clients that maybe are more, mid-sized, small businesses, but do you have any advice about kind of like how you find something niche or unique that will still solve the problem, but not duplicate what's already out there?
Yeah, I think that there's always what's called it's harder than it looks, is I guess the short answer, right? But having a competitive moat is what it's called, right? A moat, like a moat around a castle, right? So you want to create some sort of a moat so that other people don't just say, hey, that's a great idea, I'm going to do that too, right? One of the ways that has been followed to do that is being the place that's the marketplace, as I described about. Like once you've created a marketplace, like it's very hard to create a marketplace. So once you've got it going, it's hard for followers to come and take away your share because you're already the marketplace where everyone comes. Another competitive moat can be data. You have some proprietary data that no one else has, right? So LinkedIn, for example, right? LinkedIn is LinkedIn because they have the data on over 1 billion people. No one else has that, right now at least, right? So I can't directly answer your question because it's a very hard question. It's the right question to ask, but you need to think strategically about, if I do this idea, what's the thing that's going to be my moat? Is it going to be a legal moat, like I have a bunch of trademarks? Is it going to be a data moat? Is it going to be some sort of an AI moat, like I've developed a model that no one else can replicate, which I think is extremely hard because of the pace of change in how fast things are going. But think about what that competitive moat might be, and do research potentially even on what are other competitive moats that others have done before in other fields that you might be able to replicate.
So it's cost a moat. Like finding smaller clients, like for example, let's say grocery picking service, right? There's all these, Instacart, whatever, but selling to, software to smaller stores around town is a more of a niche kind of market where they don't want to pay for the service fees of maybe Instacart, but your application might fit their needs. So you're offering something that's smaller scale at a lower cost to these smaller vendor clients. Is that a thing?
Well, you still have to make money, first of all. So then if that's your moat, you've got to figure out how you're going to make money. Secondly, I think it's a very dangerous moat to pursue, because a bigger company could just say, I'm going to do that for free, right? So for example, like, there are a lot of things that, do you remember when we had to pay for AOL? I don't know if anyone's old enough here. Horace is old enough. You got me, man. All right. But then Gmail came along and did it for free. And that's all we know now. Who here pays for email? Oh, you pay?
Because you exceed the capacity.
There's a saying in tech, either you pay or you're the product, right? Because in Gmail, you're the product. Your eyeballs are the product, right? And then they make money off of advertising to you. So I think it's a dangerous thing to try to compete on cost, right? Maybe there's something there, but the history would tell me that can be scary for a small company. Let's see, what do we got next? Yes.
So given the advancement of AI and the fast pace of shipping, features into products, how does someone conduct enablement for sales nowadays?
Yeah, I mean, there's more and more enablement as well that's going the way of AI. So at LinkedIn, for example, we had a traditional sales training team, right, that would do these training classes and things like that whenever we had a new product. One of the more recent things, though, that we added on was an AI customer, right? So now you practice pitching to an actual AI, right? And then that AI responds with objections and saying no, or I don't have time right now, or something. And then so that's something that's much more scalable, right? And you can configure it to your needs as an organization using your vernacular and your terminology. And there's a lot of vendors coming up now that are doing that type of work. Yeah. Yes.
So how were you guys at LinkedIn able to, for your premium, how are you guys able to get like an initial subscriber base, retain that subscriber base, even like grow exponentially? Like what were those internal meetings look like? Can you tell us? And what were like some methods that worked for the sales team and some methods that didn't work?
Where do I start with this one? In brief, I would say that once the free platform had been established and was providing value for people, then you could say, okay, we're going to capture some of that value. But you've got to deliver value before you can actually ask people to pay for it, right? So once people started seeing, oh, there's this thing in LinkedIn, okay, not only is it my professional address book and it's always up to date, but I can reach out to people, and this is fantastic, right? And then you can start to create a premium level that says, well, you can reach out to more people, or you can send more emails or something like that, right? So something that adds even more value. But you always keep the free value as well to keep people coming back, right, and engaged. So I think that over time, the team there has just been very thoughtful about like, for our members, what is something that we want to keep free, and what are the things that we think should be gated to premium, right? The additional value. And we don't want to like have too much stuff be paid for, otherwise people just don't come back, right? Because there's not enough free value that they're getting. So always have to maintain that balance between free and paid. In terms of sales team, lots of mistakes and lots of trying. I think that when you're a big company, if you are, inshallah, fortunate enough to become a big company, one of the things that becomes very hard when you're a big company is taking risks, right? And that's how you get disrupted, right? That's how Google which is like printing money still from advertising and from search, is now like, if you go to their headquarters, I'm sure, like running around in panic because of ChatGPT, right? So you always have to, and the thing, it's not because they didn't have AI, right? It's not because they didn't have their own version like Gemini well before. It's been there for years. It's just that they were always worried, and they're still worried, that their existing business gets cannibalized by the release of this technology, right? That's called the innovator's dilemma. There's a book about this you can read, right? Is you have lots of money, billions, and in the case of Google, hundreds of billions of dollars at stake of advertising revenue. We're crazy to release this new technology, even though that's the direction things are going in. And then you see it coming, and you still don't do anything about it because you're stuck with your existing revenue as a publicly traded company that needs to answer to shareholders. And that's how you lose, that's how you get BlackBerry happen, right? They saw it, you don't think they saw it coming with the smartphone? They saw it coming a mile away. They saw it coming a decade away. But they were frozen in indecision. So you've got to be able to stick your neck out even and be brave and courageous, even when it's a difficult situation that cannibalizes your existing revenue, because you might just lose all your revenue anyway if you don't do that. All right, up front here.
Okay, so soft pain for the decision makers that have the budget. How do you get to the decision makers?
You talk to you make lots of calls. You get people hanging up on you. Ideally, you use warm introductions, much better than cold calls, in my opinion, though you have to do a little of both. And then you talk to whoever will talk to you internally, explain the value to them, and hope that they introduce you to the next level and the next level and the next level. All right, so that's like the short, classic example of how you go about it in sales.
Can I have one follow-up?
Yes.
Is there still value in cold for B2B specifically?
I think so. I think that from the outside, I'm just like, I see like all these advertisements for products that are AI generated outreach, right? For companies, I'm like, it's just gonna get slop upon slop now, where the noise is just gonna keep increasing, and it's gonna be like a technology battle between more and more AI generated outreach and more AI generated defenses on people's inboxes, right? So the only real way to cut through that is warm introductions. Yeah. Yes.
On the pricing is critical on the any sales thing, right? So many times the founders decide the pricing and sales team go into it and they try to sell it. So based on your experience, what do you suggest on that? How do you get the input from the sales team to balance it out on the pricing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the short answer is it's art and science, right? So you do want to talk to your salespeople, and you want to just talk to enough of them. Like if you have more salespeople, it's great, right? Interview to understand like where's their temperature on like, what if we price this at $40? What if we price it at $100? What if we price it at $400? And see where there's a drop off, and then figure out how you can be just to the left of that drop off, where they say, no, we can't sell it beyond that price, right? So that's like a type of pricing analysis that you do. And you talk to your marketing people, you talk to customers, of course, you consider your cost of sale. Incidentally, there's whole new ways of thinking about this now with AI, and I'm happy to discuss it with anyone afterwards about AI pricing, because what's happening now is for SaaS companies that sell on a per seat basis, it's becoming an issue, because if you have a product that has great AI, it's a blessing and a curse. Because the curse is now it's so effective that the customer needs to buy less seats because they need to use less people using that product, because each seat is so much more effective. So you're cannibalizing your own product by being so valuable. So you have to price it differently based on the AI value, and I have some thoughts on that as well if anyone's interested.
Most of them are using usage-based model.
What was that?
Most of them are doing usage-based model, so that's like, it depends on
yes,
the
there is that. Yes, so the brother you're saying a lot of them are doing it usage-based. So here's the thing. So let me just kind of break it down for you in like sort of a logic tree of AI pricing. So first thing to determine is AI like a small feature of your product, or is it like the big thing that's gonna revolutionize your product? And do an honest assessment there, right? If it's a feature, you build it into your feature set, you maybe charge for a premium for it, but you're still doing SaaS per seat pricing, okay? If it's like game changing, where it's gonna really change the way your customer is even using the product and use less of it, and this is, for example, at LinkedIn, so I ran a business where we sold to companies that were trying to hire people off of LinkedIn, our talent business, right? And so you can imagine I sell, like, the people who are using the product that I'm selling are recruiters at companies. So we added all these AI enhancements where now they can customize outreach, the AI can do like sourcing for them, so then they come in, they already have like this inbox of like 10 candidates. So now you're like, okay, customers need less recruiters because the product is doing so much of the work, right? So we're cannibalizing our own business. So when you have something that can be game changing like that, you need to think differently about it. And so it can either be on a per usage basis if the costs of the AI are really gonna drive that, right? Because no longer in this world, gone are the days of zero marginal cost, right? Software, right? AI is a cost of goods sold now, right? Tech companies are having to get used to that. So you either do it on a per usage basis, or you can do it on a per outcome basis, right? So for example, in this example that I just gave you from LinkedIn, we could choose to charge based on hires, like that you made with the product, right? So like the number of hires that you made, we're gonna like kind of measure that on LinkedIn after the fact, and then we're gonna charge you based on that with some baseline sort of subscription level that's still there.
Outcome is harder unless you have scale to validate.
Outcome is harder because you need to validate,
Validate.
right? And you need to have the measurement in place because people are paying for it.
Yeah.
So they're not gonna tolerate errors in the billing if that's the case.
And also the
Yeah.
pain point is very strong.
Yeah.
As you said, like hiring, like you want to have a very good hire.
Yeah, so you can do it on hires, or you can do it a little bit upstream of not an outcome, but an output, which could be number of qualified candidates, right? Not the hire, but the level before that, where it's like the number of people that are legitimately qualified, we're gonna charge you based on that. Yes?
I'm still stuck on a question before that you are a niche person like Uber or DoorDash, where you connect someone to someone and it's a service. So for example, Muslim matrimonials or hifz, I get a lot of target advertising for hifz for my children, that kind of stuff. It's a service, and then there's a teacher and a student connecting, or whatever, two parties. And then how do you write that job description for that perfect, for example, Airbnb? How do you write that job description for what an Airbnb should be? And then a perfect job description for what the person living in the Airbnb should be, so that they connect?
I'm not completely clear on the question. So
you're matching two people.
you're matching, so you're saying like the two-sided
Basically
marketplace thing.
marketplace,
Yeah. So what value are you creating for each side is the question to ask, right? So like in Uber, for example, you're creating value for the drivers of what? Money, right? Income. You're creating value for the passengers of what? Going somewhere.
Is it income,
Right.
or is it in the zip code?
Sorry, what do you mean?
Is it income, or is it that they're in the zip code?
It's income. Like, why would I be a driver on the Uber platform? What is the reason I want to use Uber as a driver? It is to make money, right? To make an income. So you need to basically, what is the value in whatever platform you have, whether that's student teacher, Uber driver passenger, restaurant consumer on DoorDash, right? And plus, actually, they have a third, which is the driver, right? And figure out what value you're creating for each one. Are you solving a pain of a marketplace that's broken right now because people aren't able to connect to other people? And are you solving that? And then therefore creating value for both sides, and then you get to capture some of that value.
But you have two standard operating procedures.
Yes, I mean, like Uber has a driver operations team and a passenger product team as well that manages both sides of the marketplace.
Actually, I have to say this to all of you guys. You know, when you discuss about any startup idea, be vocal about it, because not anybody is hearing your idea is immediately going to implement it. Even the companies, even the big companies, they know about the problem, they're not going to do it. As you said, like in innovators dilemma and all of those things. A lot of the time when you talk about it, people will give you honest feedback on how they think about it, even to validate your product. So that's like I see here, everybody's asking a question in a hypothetical way. Be more.
Your question, I would hire a CEO, and a CSO at the same time, and I would do both in a way that matches.
No, the thing that let me finish it. On the hardest, as he also said that if you go and ask for venture capitalists for the money, and if you say like I want to create a two-sided marketplace, they're gonna say like it's very expensive, and it's the hardest one. And then answering brother's question, like hey, I created this product, I want to sell. Every venture investor is going to ask you, are you successful in selling your product? Because when you're a small team, the first person who has to sell is the CEO. It's very, very important.
I'm gonna actually pause now because it is 2:07. I want to make sure that people who need to escape here can escape, right? I'm actually, mashallah, I was not expecting, first of all, this many people, so jazakumullah khair to the organizers here for organizing this. I really appreciate it. I was ready for like a little circle with like 3 people. Alhamdulillah, it was great. May Allah reward you all for doing this. This is a wonderful space, by the way. I look forward to kind of taking a quick look around, maybe grab a coffee, we'll see. But if anyone has any questions, I'm gonna leave my email address here, and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to provide feedback on your specific idea, circumstance, situation as it relates to sales or otherwise, and just make dua for me, you know, inshallah. That,
Starting a company?
am I starting a company?